All right, so are you ready for this? We're diving deep into this Joe Rogan experience. You know, the one with Chamath Palihapitiya?
Oh, yeah, I remember you mentioning that one.
Yeah, you said you wanted like the TLDR on it, right? For
Yeah.
the future of, well, everything.
Basically, yeah.
This is it. Think of it like the Spark Notes,
Okay.
but way more interesting.
And way more unpredictable.
True. Knowing Chamath.
Exactly. He's not afraid to just throw out these, like, seriously bold ideas.
It's true.
I mean, the way he connects the dots that, like, tech education, even global politics, it's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. To give you some context, this isn't just like the newest phone or whatever.
Hmm.
Rogan and Chamath really go deep on how tech shapes us.
Yeah.
Like how we think the jobs we do, even the future of humanity.
Wow.
Yeah, and they keep coming back to this idea of 2 + 2 = 5.
2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right.
It sounds bizarre,
I know.
but hear me out on this.
Okay.
It's their way of talking about algorithms and misinformation.
Okay.
So the idea is if enough people online start saying 2 + 2 = 5, it takes on a life of its own. It starts to feel true, even though it's objectively false.
I can see that happening, yeah.
And, you know, Rogan loves to explore those strange corners of the internet. This is where it gets really thought-provoking, though.
Okay.
It's not just about math equations. It's about how these algorithms we've built prioritize engagement over accuracy.
Wow.
They'd rather serve us something crazy that keeps us scrolling, even if it's not true.
And that's the scary part, because most people don't even realize it's happening. It's like we're bombarded with so much information every day, and these algorithms, they're designed to exploit our biases, you know, to keep us hooked on this constant stream of content, whether it's true or not.
Exactly. And that brings us to Chamath's argument about education. He's basically saying traditional schools, they're failing to prepare kids for a world where AI exists.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he uses this comparison of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk.
Okay.
You know, these brilliant, innovative minds. Our current system would probably stifle that unique potential.
Yeah, you know, it's a question of priorities.
Yeah.
In a world where AI can access and process information instantly, rote memorization is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
What we need are critical thinking skills, you know, creativity, the ability to adapt and solve problems in new ways, the things that AI, at least for now, can't replicate.
Exactly. And they even went there with the ADHD discussion.
Oh, wow.
Look, I'm not saying it's not a real condition, but Chamath raises a really interesting point. What if some kids diagnosed with ADHD aren't disordered, but simply wired differently? What if their learning styles just don't fit the mold?
It's a really provocative question.
Yeah.
Like, instead of asking, what's wrong with this child, maybe we should be asking, what's wrong with the system that's failing to meet their needs?
Yeah, like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
And it's not just about kids who learn differently. As AI and automation get more sophisticated, it's going to change everything, the entire job market.
Yeah.
How do we even prepare for jobs that don't even exist yet?
That's the million-dollar question, right? We're potentially on the brink of this massive shift in how we work. It's natural to feel some anxiety about that, especially when you consider the potential for job displacement.
And that's where Chamath's personal story comes in. He talks about his own experiences with economic hardship, and it clearly shapes his perspective on AI-driven job loss.
Yeah, he's not speaking from some ivory tower. He understands the human cost of unemployment. He's been there.
Right.
And that experience informs his thinking on solutions like universal basic income.
UBI.
Yeah, which, believe it or not, Rogan didn't completely shoot down.
Really?
Yeah.
The UBI discussion gets really interesting. For those who haven't heard of it, it's the idea of giving everyone a guaranteed income, regardless of whether they have a job or not.
Right.
It sounds radical.
It is, but that's what makes it so fascinating to discuss. What if our traditional understanding of work is about to become completely obsolete?
I know, it's a big what if.
How do we ensure that people have not only financial security, but also a sense of purpose in a world where their job might be done by a robot?
That's the question, right? Money is one thing,
Yeah.
but it doesn't replace that feeling of contributing to something larger than yourself.
Exactly. It's about more than just surviving. It's about thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to the even bigger question about AI itself. Is it a threat or an opportunity?
And you guessed it, Chamath brings his trademark optimism. He's got all these examples of how AI is already revolutionizing healthcare, like drastically improving surgical success rates.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He talks about how with AI assisting in a particular type of surgery, the success rate goes up to something like 80%.
Wow.
Now, compare that to the current rate, which is in the single digits. It highlights the potential of this technology to improve one, even save lives.
That's incredible.
It's mind-blowing. And it's not just healthcare. He talks about material science,
Yeah.
how AI is helping us discover and design entirely new materials with properties we never thought possible.
Yeah.
It makes you think maybe this whole AI thing isn't all doom and gloom.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the fear-mongering, but every major technological advancement, whether it's the printing press or the internet, has come with its own set of anxieties and disruptions.
It's true.
We've adapted before, and we can adapt again.
It's so true. Humans are nothing if not resourceful.
Huh.
But get ready for a bit of a turn here, because the conversation takes a bit of a serious turn as they start talking geopolitics.
Yeah, and you can really feel that weight when he talks about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just some, like, abstract political game for him, you know?
Oh, wait.
He brings up growing up in Sri Lanka
Okay.
during their civil war.
Wow.
And it's clear how deeply that experience has shaped his views on conflict and violence.
You can hear it in his voice.
Oh.
He's seen firsthand the devastation of war, and it informs his perspective on the current global landscape,
Right.
which, as he and Rogan point out, is pretty tense right now.
Yeah.
They talk about Russia, China, Ukraine, Iran,
Yeah.
all these potential flashpoints with the potential to escalate.
And it's not about predicting the future or saying that war is inevitable.
Yep.
It's about recognizing the risks and having these difficult conversations about how to mitigate those risks.
Yeah, for sure.
They even use this phrase, the nuclear elephant in the room,
Yeah, to say the least.
which is a little unsettling.
Yeah, it's like this underlying anxiety we've all learned to live with.
Yeah.
But Chamath's point is, we can't afford to become numb to it.
Right.
This isn't a movie where
Yeah.
everything magically works out in the end.
Sure.
These are real weapons with real consequences.
Exactly. And what's interesting is how Chamath connects his tech background to his experiences with conflict.
Oh, wow.
He argues that we need to find a way to redirect the resources and innovation of the military-industrial complex towards more humane goals.
Like he's saying, instead of building a better weapon, what if we focused on building a better world?
Exactly. And he uses drone technology as an example.
Huh.
Right now, we mainly see drones used in warfare, but what if we repurpose that technology?
Okay.
Imagine using them for disaster relief, environmental monitoring, delivering medical supplies to remote areas.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the tools we have and finding ways to use them for good.
Which brings them to this whole critique of government inefficiency.
Right.
They talk about companies like SpaceX and Starlink as these examples of agility and innovation, and how government-led initiatives often seem stuck in the mud.
It's a pretty stark contrast.
It is.
Rogan and Chamath argue that in this rapidly changing world, we need governments that can move quickly, adapt to new challenges, and implement solutions effectively.
Yeah.
The old ways of doing things just aren't going to cut it anymore.
And that circles back to this theme of personal responsibility versus government intervention,
Yeah.
which pops up a few times throughout the conversation.
Okay.
One of the examples they use is the debate around drug legalization
Right.
and how simply making something illegal doesn't make it go away.
Right. It's a complex issue.
It is.
They even bring up the example of Oregon, where they decriminalized all drugs and how that's had some unintended consequences.
Interesting.
But the heart of their argument is that we need more nuanced solutions to these social challenges.
Yeah, I can see that.
They also talk about the food stamp debate
Okay.
and whether the government should have a say in what people buy with those benefits, even if it's for their own good.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is?
Where do we draw the line between individual freedom and the role of government in protecting people from, well, themselves?
It's a question that philosophers have been debating for centuries.
That's true.
And it's only going to get more complicated as we move further into the 21st century.
I agree.
And speaking of complicated questions, they couldn't resist diving into the 2024 election, could they?
Not a chance. But
Yeah.
what I found interesting is that they didn't frame it as a typical left versus right issue.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Instead, they present it as this fundamental choice between what they call traditional governance and a more radical reimagining of how we do things.
And what's important is that they aren't advocating for one side or the other.
Exactly.
They're simply highlighting the stark differences between these two approaches and challenging listeners to think critically about the implications of each path.
Which is really what this whole deep dive is about, right?
Yeah.
It's not about giving you all the answers.
Yeah. Right.
It's about giving you the information and the different perspectives to form your own conclusions.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point, especially now. We're living in a time of information overload where it's easier than ever to get caught up in echo chambers and filter bubbles.
And with AI